My wife drained our twin daughter's entire college fund, $230,000. I had been saving since the day they were born and vanished with her lover. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty account while my coffee cooled beside me, wondering, how in the world you explain to your children that their future had just disappeared overnight? But when they came downstairs, they didn't cry. They didn't even ask where she was. They just looked at each other, then smirked. "Dad," one of them said softly, "don't worry. We handled it." 3 days later, my wife called, screaming. My name is Cassie Holt, and this isn't the story of a broken man. It's the story of what happens when betrayal finally meets its own reflection. I never imagined that justice could come from two 17-year-old girls, but I was wrong. Before I tell you what happened, I want to know you're here with me. Comment hi, or tell me where you're watching from. Knowing someone is listening sometimes changes everything. And if my story moves you, please subscribe or follow, not for me, but for every parent who has ever been blindsided and forced to rebuild from nothing. Because none of us should go through that silence alone. The kettle clicked off just as the sun slid across our kitchen window, turning the Blue Ridge a pale gold. Tuesday, 6:50 a.m., same routine. Grind the beans. Open the laptop. Check the Holt College Trust before the girls came down. I typed the password without thinking, the way your hands remember what your head doesn't have to. The dashboard blinked, refreshed, and then I saw it. Available balance, $0. I refreshed again. Still zero. One more time, because superstition becomes reflex when logic fails. 0. The number felt like a crater opening in my chest. I called the bank with the kettle hissing behind me, gave my passcode, and listened to keys clatter. "Yes, Mr. Holt," the agent said, flat like a receipt. Funds were transferred by the authorized secondary user, Ms. Sable Quinn, to an interbank account. 3 large transfers in the last 72 hours. She read the timestamps like eulogies. My mouth moved before sound came. 16 years of scraping, of saying no to trips, yes to second jobs. $185,000 for their future, plus $45,000 from family savings gone like a light switched off. I hung up and called Sable. 1 ring, then silence. I opened Find My iPhone. Her location was grayed out. Location services off, of course. The coffee went cold as I stood there, taking stock of every small trust I'd placed. I had added the girls as authorized users to teach responsibility. Filtered security alert emails into promotions because the bank sent too many, never touching the old filter rule. I could hear Sable in my head, months ago, laughing about boomer passwords, kissing my cheek, running late to Hartwell Design Studio. Something about a site visit, a new project manager, Ethan Navarro, super talented, she had said. "You'd like him." The staircase creaked. Mira came down first, hair pinned back, that focused look she gets when she's memorizing anatomy terms. Taz followed, hoodie sleeves pushed to her elbows, the half smile that usually means she solved a problem she wasn't supposed to. I said it before I could soften it. "Your college fund it's gone." Mira looked at Taz. The two of them exchanged a calm look that almost scared me. Then Taz's mouth tipped into her small smile. "Dad, don't worry. We handled it." I stood there, like I had missed a step in the dark. The future I'd spent years building had just cracked in my hands. And my daughters my careful mirror. And my chaotic, brilliant Taz were looking at me like this was a chess game, and they already knew the end. That night, the rain and pine drifted through the cracked windows as we sat in the living room. I hit record on my phone because the only way I could trust my memory was to put it on tape. "Tell me everything," I said. Mira started. "It began 3 months ago," she said, hands wrapped around her notebook. My printer had died. I used Mom's laptop to print a presentation and clicked mail instead of print by accident. The first subject line on top read, "Can't stop thinking." About last night. She waited, watching for my reaction. I didn't flinch. Not then. She wrote down all the daytime subject lines. The tone shifts. She tracked the nights Mom came home late, Tuesdays and Thursdays mostly, and who texted her right before. She kept a log of license plates on cars parked 2 blocks down when Mom asked her not to wait up. Receipts tucked in coat pockets for restaurants we never went to, and a valet stub stamped Crane House. She tapped the name. Keep this in mind. Taz. Slid her laptop onto the coffee table and spun it toward me. I took the digital side, she said. Browser history. Saved passwords. Cookies. Patterns. Mom reuses patterns. Your birthday, our birth year, the wedding date. She laughs about boomer passwords, but she's one herself. From her work IP at Hartwell Design, I traced late-night logins to the pedants to the bank. The transfers didn't go straight out, they laddered. $400 here, $1,200 there. Always after 10 p.m. Always on nights she was with the team. Each hop moved funds from the Holt College Trust to a generic interbank holding. Then into something called Sunset JV. Taz clicked another tab. Emails show co-shared access, she said. Mira took over, scanning the thread. The name Ethan keeps appearing, she said quietly. Mom mentioned him at dinner. So there he was, Ethan Navarro, co-signing files, sharing calendars, attaching floor plan photos not labeled Hartwell. Personal email after hours. Arizona, Taz added. Sunset. JV's bank is online only, registered in Scottsdale. Mailing address. A co-working space there. In Mom's sent folder, we found a PDF, Scottsdale studio deposit received. She and Ethan were planning a soft opening by summer. The words scraped through me like gravel. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Mira's eyes softened. Because telling you without proof would hurt you twice. Taz kept going. Drafts folder. Resignation letter slated for Friday at 8 a.m. calendar block Saturday afternoon. Talk to Cashin. Sunday morning flight to Phoenix. A note to herself. Girls will be fine. Scholarships possible. He'll cope. 6 words, neat as a grocery list. Cutting me open. I looked at the girl who had documented everything, and the girl who could follow digital footprints the way other kids followed pop stars, and I understood the look they had shared that morning in the kitchen. They had known they had mapped the betrayal while I made coffee and filed alert emails into spam. Mira flipped a page in her notebook. I did some physical trailing, she said, almost apologetic, only in public places. Tuesdays and Thursdays. She didn't go to Hartwell after 7 p.m. She went to a loft building near the river. The same car was there often. I checked the plate Ethan's and the valet stub, Crane House. She looked up. Remember the name. Taz's fingers hovered over the trackpad, then settled. One more piece, she said, glancing at her. Sister, Sunset JV isn't just Mom and Ethan. She opened a folder labeled Sunset Photos. The first image, a model home with desert landscaping, caption from a Scottsdale realtor, deposit received. Next, a screenshot of an email thread where Sable wrote, "He doesn't know about you yet," followed by a heart. He who? I asked. Taz pulled up a LinkedIn profile, Dorian Crane, Phoenix, hospitality investor, and then an Instagram story. From a private account captured by a helpful stranger named Adele, who had followed Sable back. In the photo, Sable wore a teardrop diamond I'd never seen, tagged at Crane House. Ethan is the cover, Taz said. Dorian is the bankroll. By the time I pieced it together, I realized my wife wasn't just betraying me. She was running a game on two men and using our daughter's futures as the buy-in. The first clue came from Taz, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, the laptop glow reflecting off her glasses. "Check this out," she said. On the screen was one of Sable's Instagram posts at Crane House, a high-end hotel in Phoenix. I knew the logo from an old conference trip. She held a wine glass over a candlelit table, plated with food worth more than my car payments. Taz enlarged the metadata. Location tags confirmed Crane House, Scottsdale branch. "See the reflection?" she added. I leaned closer. In the mirror behind Sable's shoulder, a man's profile, clean-cut, expensive suit. Not Ethan. Mira picked up, flipping open her notebook. "Mom wrote Ethan an email. He doesn't know about you yet. Ethan thinks he's the only one. But there's a third player." I felt cold lodge beneath my ribs. The woman who once refused new shoes so we could add $50 to the fund was juggling levers and laundering the savings into a fantasy life. By the next evening, Taz traced Crane House to a chain. Owned by Dorian Crane, a Phoenix investor backing small studios. Mira found emails on Sable's work laptop that explained it all. She and Ethan pitched Dorian a boutique studio concept in Scottsdale. He agreed to fund it. Ethan was the face. Dorian held the capital. Mom had been moving the fund in small bites so we wouldn't notice until it was too late. That was the night my daughters told me they had a plan. Mira laid out a sheet of paper titled Project Red Cinder because even when a fire dies, there's always heat in the ashes. The goal was simple: protect the fund, expose the lies, and leave no room for Sable to twist the story. They divided it into three fronts. The first, the corporate front. Mira would plant evidence at Hartwell Design showing Sable's misuse of company time and resources. She had been emailing Ethan during work hours and using Hartwell servers for personal projects. If Penelope Hart found out, she'd have to act. The second, the social front. Taz would use her tech skills to reach Dorian Crane directly under a fabricated identity. He thought he was the puppet master. She said, "We'll make him cut his own strings." The third, the financial front. Together, they'd monitor the Sunset Joint Ventures account in real time, waiting for the perfect moment to pull every dollar back into the Holt College Trust. They were methodical, patient, and precise. Before any action could begin, it had to be airtight. MEER, a slid, a printed page across the table, my own signature, adding the girls as authorized users last year. "You taught us to be responsible with money," she said. We listened. Taz angled the laptop so I could see the last line of her notes. Friday, resignation. Saturday, tell Dad. Sunday, fly. She tapped the date. She thinks she's 3. Steps ahead, Taz said, that half smile returning, colder this time. She forgot who raised us. Mira laid her palm over mine. "Dad," she said, steady as a pulse. "There's one more thing I didn't believe at first." Taz clicked. A final tab. Mom doesn't just have Ethan. She paused, and the screen filled with a Scottsdale wire confirmation and a name we hadn't said out loud. Dorian Crane. By now, the full picture was clear. My wife wasn't only betraying me, she was running a scheme on 2 men while staking our daughter's futures as collateral. The first clue came from Taz, sitting cross-legged, laptop glow reflecting in her glasses. Photos, metadata, Instagram posts, location tags. Each piece clicked into place. Ethan was the cover. Dorian held the bankroll. Sunset JV held the transfers. Mom had been moving money in tiny increments to keep us blind until it was too late. By the evening, we had everything documented. Emails, screenshots, bank confirmations, IP logs, metadata. Nothing touched that couldn't be defended. No confrontation yet. They called it Project Red Cinder for a reason. Even when the fire dies, there's heat left to burn. The house was quiet except for the hum of Taz's laptop and the click of Mira's pen. Outside, the mountains looked calm and indifferent. Inside, our world had become a ledger of betrayal. My daughters had mapped the moves, traced every lie, and planned every step. Mira explained the corporate strategy. Taz handled the social manipulation, and together they would secure the financial front. Every dollar. Every piece of evidence. Every move carefully timed. They had mirrored Mom's emails, preserved metadata, and documented each transfer. They weren't reckless. They were surgical. Finally, I understood. The woman who had once refused herself small comforts to build. The fund we all trusted had underestimated two 17-year-old girls. They had learned responsibility, patience, and foresight. And now, the balance of power had shifted. I leaned back on the couch, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. They had the plan, the proof, and the patience to see it through. And for the first time since waking that morning to an empty account, I felt something I hadn't in days: hope. Because they had this under control. Before Sable could take one more step, before Ethan and Dorian could believe they were in charge, my daughters were ready. The fund would be safe. The lies would be exposed. And justice, calculated, patient, and precise, would meet betrayal at every turn. Because Sable Holt had forgotten one thing. She was never dealing with helpless children. She was dealing with two brilliant, unstoppable girls and the father who had taught them everything that mattered. And that was how our story began, not with the betrayal, but with the quiet, deliberate, unstoppable plan of two 17-year-old girls who refused to lose what was theirs. I went to the bank the next morning, adding Mira and Taz as authorized users, a precaution I'd made when they turned 16, but now it became our shield. We created a backup of every mail, every IP log, and every text stored across 3 drives. And one offline archive in a safety deposit box I called an old law firm we'd once used for property matters, asking vague questions about what counted as retrieving misappropriated funds. I didn't mention names. Mira sat beside me, silent, her hands folded in her lap. That night, as the girls laid out their plans, Mira looked at me and asked, "If Mom begged for forgiveness, would you give it?" I couldn't answer. My silence must have said enough. Taz leaned back, eyes sharp. "Justice first," she said quietly. "Then maybe forgiveness." They told me to get some rest. Thatamaro would be a busy day at Hartwell Design. I didn't sleep. I watched the fire die in the hearth, the embers glowing faintly like the plan we just named, Red Cinder. What was left of US was about to burn. For good. 6 days after discovering the empty account, I woke before dawn to find both girls in the living room, eyes ringed from no-sleep, faces bathed in the cold blue light of their screens. They were running finale checks. "Today's the day," Taz said, stretching her fingers. Mira only nodded, tying her hair back. The spreadsheet on her screen looked like a war map, columns of names, times, and email subjects. "We have one chance," she said. "No mistakes." They briefed me like field commanders. Mira's front Hartwell Design would go first. I waste driver. She'd pose as a university student collecting interviews for a business management project, just long enough to plant the USB loaded with incriminating emails between Sable and Ethan, the after-hours messages, the flirtations sent from company accounts, and the floor plans marked as personal studio. She wore a pressed blazer hairnet and carried herself like someone born to walk into boardrooms. I parked 2 blocks away and waited, hands gripping the steering wheel tight enough to leave marks. Through the glass, I watched her move easily through the lobby. 15 minutes later, she emerged calm as if she just dropped off a resume. Done, she said, slipping into the passenger seat. Break room right by the coffee machine. Penelope Hartsable's boss was due in any minute. Mira looked out the window. Expression unreadable. That's the first fuse lit. By midday, it was Taz's turn. Her battleground wasn't a building. It was the internet. She'd spent the week crafting the persona of Adele Kinsey, a 25-year-old marketing consultant new to Phoenix, with a handful of convincing photos and a sharp wit. She'd already befriended Dorian Crane through Instagram and business forums. At 11 a.m., she sent him 3 pictures Sable at an upscale restaurant holding hands across the table with Ethan. Their swipes paid on Ethan's company card were attached. I sat beside her on the couch, the only sound the clack of her keyboard and the blood rushing in my ears. Dorian replied within minutes. Who are you? How do you have these? Taz typed back. Maybe you should ask her where she was last Thursday. Then she shut her laptop and stood. He'll cancel everything before lunch. She was right. At 12:47 p.m., Sable's company email received a message flagged urgent from accounting funding for Scottsdale. Studio has been suspended. All contracts under review. While the social and corporate fronts burned, the financial one waited in silence. At 3 p.m., Taz sat at the kitchen table beside me, the Air Electric. On her screen, the Sunset Joint Ventures account glowed. Open security questions answered. Using the very details I'd ancestred with Sable, her maiden name, my birth date, our wedding year. The irony stung. She used us to build the key, I murmured. And now we're using it to lock her out. Taz's lips curved. Exactly. At 3:47 p.m., she executed the transfer. $230 flowed back into the Holt College Trust, followed by a silent confirmation. Ping. She left a note in the account memo field. Red Cinder says, hello. The same second, my phone vibrated with a bank alert. Sable's phone would have received one too. Somewhere, her world was tilting, and she didn't yet know why. By evening, the house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the soft rain against the windows. The girls finally collapsed on the sofa asleep before I could thank them. I stood there looking at them, the same twins who once fought over, who got to lick the batter, now orchestrating a multi-layered operation to protect their own futures. I pulled a blanket over their shoulders and sat back, watching the faint blue light of the laptop flicker against their faces. The account was holy gang. The evidence was safe. The storm had begun to move outward. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like a man undone. I felt like a father standing guard at the edge of something far bigger than vengeance. Red Cinder wasn't just a plan. It was our reckoning. And by tomorrow, the fire would reach her. Friday came heavy and gray, the kind of morning that makes the air itself feel loaded. I drove to work like any other day, but every mile hummed with the tension of what we'd set in motion. Sable's resignation letter was scheduled for that morning. By Sunday, she was supposed to be gone. New life, new lover, new city. I kept telling myself to act normal, but my hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. At 9:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. Mara's text. It's coffee hour for Penelope. That was the cue. The first domino. At 10:15, the Hartwell-designed building became a hive of whispers. Penelope Hartsable's boss had just found a U.S. bribe on the break room counter left behind. She assumed by one of the interns. She opened it expecting reports and instead found a full archive of emails between Sable and Ethan. Messages sent during office hours, attachments marked private sketches, entire conversations about a side project they were calling Scottsdale Studio. Some messages were personal, even intimate. By 10:30, Penelope had forwarded everything to HR. By 10:45, Ethan was sitting in the conference room denying everything. At 1100, Sable was called in and suspended pending investigation. By lunchtime, the gossip had turned into wildfire. Employees whispered in corridors. Screens flickered with screenshots. Ethan, in desperation, blamed Sable, calling her manipulative, saying she'd let him on. Hartwell Design was imploding from within, and I could almost hear it all from 2 towns away. Around noon, the second domino hit. Dorian Crane walked through Hartwell's glass doors in a storm, gray suit holding the contract that once tied his investment to Sable's project. He slammed it on Penelope's desk in front of half the design team. "You used me," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You used him. You used a variant." The office froze. Someone recorded it. By the afternoon, the video was circulating through the company's internal chat. Sable stood there in stunned silence as Dorian tore into her reputation, shouting that she had played both him and Ethan for her own gain. When he left, she was shaking eyes, darting as if searching for something to anchor her. She didn't find it. By 3 o'clock, the last domino was already leaning. I could picture her sitting at her desk, trying to salvage something, logging into the Sunset Joint Ventures account to pull what was left and realizing it was empty. At 3:47 p.m., the transfer confirmation I'd watched with Taz the night before had completed. The account showed a 0 balance. She must have thought she'd been hacked. She called the bank frantic, only to hear the polite voice explain that the withdrawal had been made legally by an authorized co-owner with all proper credentials. She tried calling Ethan. He was already cleaning out his desk. She tried Dorian. He'd blocked her number. For the first time in months, she was alone inside Huron's scheme. By the time I left work, an email waited in my inbox. "Your account has been credited." The whole trust was whole again. I stared at the numbers for a long time, not sure whether to feel proud or terrified. Mira and Taz had pulled off something that most adults wouldn't even dare to attempt. They'd restored what was ours, but in doing so, they'd crossed into a world of deception that none of us could ever fully return from. That night, as I poured a drink, I didn't even want my phone rang. Arizona area code. I already knew. I answered, said nothing. On the other end was Chaos Ragged, breathing a sob that turned into a scream. "Cashin," she shouted. "What did you do?" "The money's gone. Everything's gone." Her voice cracked somewhere between fury and panic. I waited until she ran out of breath. "Maybe," I said quietly for the first time, "you're feeling what we felt." She cursed. Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment before setting it down. The girls were upstairs asleep. Outside, the storm rolled in slow and heavy. Inside, the fire we'd started was spreading exactly as planned. The rain had been falling since dusk, a soft percussion against the windows of Mistity. I was rereading the legal documents, bank confirmations, transaction logs when the phone rang again. Same Arizona number. I pressed speaker and the sound of Sable's voice filled the room, cracked and frantic. "Cashin, please. Everything's gone. They for Edma." Dorian's vanished. Ethan's blaming me. The account. Our account is empty. Someone hacked us. Her words tumbled over each other. Desperate, wild. I didn't interrupt. I let the silence between each breath stretch until she finally asked, "Do you know anything about this?" I leaned back. "My daughter's watching from the doorway." "I know," I said, evenly, "that the girls' college fund has been restored." Ever isn't. There was a beat of silence, then a sharp intake of breath. "You," she started, but another voice cut in. Mira stepped forward, her face calm, her tone level. "Hi, Mom." The room went still. For a moment, all I could hear was rain and the faint static from the phone line. Then Taz came to stand beside her. "Sister," eyes gleaming in the low light. "Do you understand now?" How she asked it softly what it feels like to be betrayed. Sable's breath came uneven. "You think you're so clever," she snapped. "You don't understand. I did this for us, for this family. I wanted a new start." Mira tilted her head. "A new start for who exactly?" The silence in the other end was heavier than any scream. Sable's voice broke again, lower now. "You can't just take my money. I'll call the police." I said, "If you really believe it's your money, go ahead, but you'll have to explain where it came from. The transfers, the side project, the investors. I'm sure they'll be fascinated." There was a pause, then a click. The line went dead. Mira looked at me. Tay shut the laptop. None of us spoke. The satisfaction I expected never came. Just a strange, hollow calm. My daughters didn't smile. They just stood there, shoulders steady, eyes unreadable, like it was soldiers who'd finished a battle they never wanted to fight. At 1:15 a.m., headlights cut through the rain outside. A car door slammed. I opened the front door before she could knock. Sable stood there in the downpour, soaked mascara streaked. Her once perfect poise disintegrated. "Cassie," she said, voice trembling. "I need to talk." I let her in. She stood by the fire dripping onto the floorboards. "You'll give the money back," she said. Not a question. I shook my head. "That money belongs to our daughters. It always did." She laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "I've lost everything." I looked at her. This woman who had shared my life for 20 years, who'd stolen from her own children without blinking. And I said, "Because you chose to trade everything for something that was never real." She stared at me for a long time, ice glassy, then turned and walked toward the door. The scent of her perfume, once familiar, now foreign, lingered in the air long after she left. Upstairs, Mira and Taz had fallen asleep on the sofa. Laptop screens dimmed beside them. I sat at the foot off stairs for a while, listening to the rain fade into mist. The fire had burned down to its last glow. A faint pulse offered among the ash. I thought of the name they'd given their planned project, Red Cinder, and how fitting it was. What hadn't been ruin was now a spark. I whispered to the quiet house. If justice had a face, it would look like theirs. But even as I said it, I knew this wasn't the end. Tomorrow there would be fallout. Tomorrow, Sable would try again because people like her don't know how to lose it quietly. The storm wasn't over yet. It had only changed direction. The rain had thinned to a drizzle by the time the clock struck 11. The house was half dark, half breathing, its silence brokenly by the soft patter of water against the windows. I sat in the living room, lights low, a single lamp casting a thin circle of warmth across the wooden floor. Upstairs, I could hear faint movement, a kind of quiet shifting that tells you someone's awake, but pretending not to be. Mira and Taze were waiting. We all were. The door creaked open. Sable stepped in without knocking. Her hair was matted from the rain, ice-swollen, the sleeves of her blouse clinging to her skin. In one hand, she carried a cracked phone. In the other, a plastic folder swollen with papers. She stood there dripping, the smell of wet pavement clinging to her like guilt. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she dropped the folder onto the table. "You've turned everyone against me," she said, her voice zero, but still sharp. "You've humiliated me, Cashin. Is that what you wanted?" I didn't move. "I didn't have to do anything," I said quietly. "The truth doesn't need help finding its way home." Her laugh came bitter and small. "You think this is justice? You think you're some kind of hero? Our marriage was dead years ago. I just wanted a new start, something alive." I looked at her. This woman I once trusted more than anyone, and said, "I can live with boredom. Sable, I can't live with watching you steal our daughter's future." The house went still again. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Then the sound of footsteps measured steady descended the stairs. Mira appeared first, notebook in hand, her face calm but set. Behind her, Taz came down with her laptop hugged to her chest. The two of them stopped halfway down the staircase, bathed in the dim light spilling from the lamp. Mira spoke first. "You want to talk, Mom?" she said, her voice even. "Then talk now before we show everything to the world." Sable froze. "You wouldn't," she whispered. I looked up at my daughters. "They're not threatening you," I said. "They're giving you the truth." Taz opened her laptop, the screen glowing cold blue against the dark. She scrolled through folders, clicking one after another, screenshots of Sable's emails with Ethan, drafts of her proposal to Dorian, records of the transfers from the college fund. Mira read from her notes, each line deliberate, her voice steady as she quoted Sable's own words. "He'll cope. The girls will be fine." Each document landed like a stone dropped in water. Ripples of silence spreading outward. Sable's knees seemed to weaken. She sat down, covering her face. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said, her voice cracking. "I just wanted out." Taz closed the laptop. "You went far enough," she said. "We just brought you back to where you started." Sable's eyes lifted to mine, searching for sympathy, finding none. "Cashin," she said, almost pleading. "You have your money back. You've ruined me. Let me leave with something. Just make sure my name doesn't get dragged through the mood." I shook my head. "You don't get to negotiate anymore." Mira stepped forward and laid a manila envelope on the table. "This is your choice," she said. "Sign and you walk away. No press, no police, just silence." Sable's hand trembled as she opened the papers. Divorce agreement final and absolute. She skimmed the terms, her face draining of color. Transfer of joint assets to cash and halt. Relinquishment of parental rights. Non-cont. Clause. Breach resulting in full public disclosure of evidence. "You expect me to sign this?" she whispered. Taz answered softly. "We expect you to do one honest thing before you leave." Sable stared at the paper for a long time, jaw tight, then picked up the pen. Her signature came out shaky, the ink bleeding slightly on the damp page. When she finished, she looked up at me, eyes red but dry. "You win," she said. I shook my head. "No one wins here. But at least the girls don't lose everything." She pushed the papers back across the table, the pen clattering beside them. As she turned to go, Mira said quietly, "Mom, one day I hope you understand that justice isn't revenge. It's just the truth finally being heard." Sable didn't look back. The door closed behind her with a sound that felt final. I stood there listening to the car engine fade into the rain. Upstairs, the girls moved quietly back to their rooms. I sank into the couch, exhaustion settling over me like a weight. 20 years of marriage had just ended without a lawyer, without a courtroom. Just 4 people, a stack of paper, and the truth laid bare. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace. Justice hadn't needed anger or violence. It had needed only clarity and the courage of 2 daughters who refused to stay silent. 3 months later, autumn settled over Asheville in shades of amber and gold. The mountains glowed, the air carried a chill, and the house, once echoing with tension, had grown quiet again. I spent most mornings on the porch with a mug of coffee, watching Mira and Taz pack for college. The world somehow had begun to move forward. The divorce was finalized quickly. The court accepted the signed agreement without challenge. Every asset, our home, the savings, the restored college fund was transferred to Tom and the girls. Sable left the state forwarding no address. Hartwell Design released an internal statement. Both Sable and Ethan were terminated. Dorian Crane filed a civil suit to reclaim his investment. The company's reputation staggered but survived while Sable's vanished entirely. I didn't file charges. I didn't need to. What remained of her reputation was punishment enough that the girls flourished. Mira was accepted into Duke University, part scholarship, part merit. Taz won a full ride to Carnegie Mellon, majoring in cybersecurity. They talked about leaving North Carolina with the same quiet determination they'd shown through everything. One night, we sat at the lawyer's office signing papers to turn the Hall Trust into something new. The Hall Education Foundation, a fund too, helped students who'd lost their financial support through betrayal or crisis. The notary's pen clicked the same sound I remembered from that night when Sable signed her name and ended it all. This time it felt different, clean, restorative. Weeks later, a single email arrived in me inbox. The sender Sable. Quinn Outlook. The subject line, "Are the girls safe? Tell them I'm sorry." I read it twice, then once more. I didn't respond. Some words don't need answers. I archived it and sat in quiet, realizing that the cruelest punishment isn't loss. It's being erased from the lives you once owned. In time, peace returned in small, unremarkable ways. I spoke at a local seminar for the foundation, sharing our story without names. Sometimes justice doesn't wear a robe or hold a gavel, I told the room full of young faces. Sometimes it looks like a daughter saying enough. The room stayed silent. For a moment, then broke into quiet applause. It wasn't triumph.